Hey, it's Jody. We are hurtling, I tell you, towards a new year. And I don't know if you are this way, but I tend to take this time of year to take stock a bit, think about how the past year went, try to lock in some good memories, and also reconnect with the things that matter to me going into a new year. It's not so much a resolution, but kind of a recalibration. And I know for me, that often means remembering my values, the work that I love, the people who make the stuff, whether it's music or art or books or audio, the stuff that helps me make sense of myself and the world. I know that's all very high-minded, but if that's not what this time of year is for, then I don't know what it is. Which all brings me to a gentle reminder, dear listener, that the end of the year also means we are nearing the end of the Radiotopia Fall fundraiser. It has been such a joy to make this day over this past year, and as you know, we have such big plans for next year as we head towards our America 250 series, and truly, we cannot do it without listeners like you taking the step from listener to becoming a Radiotopia member. When you support Radiotopia, you are literally helping us make this show by providing stable funding that we can use to pay for equipment, to pay our researcher, to work with Radiotopia to market the show and grow our audience and do fun collaborations. Support from people like you is the Jenga piece that keeps this whole thing from crashing down. And remember earlier when I mentioned checking in with your values? Well, to me, independent, ambitious media, a collective of the best audio makers in the world, gosh, that feels right in line with the kinds of values I want to express, and I suspect you do too, going into a new year. So, I know you're watching the calendar, but there is still time. You can do it right now. Cast a vote for this show and all of Radiotopia. Go to thisdaypod.com to support us right now. thisdaypod.com to make your tax-deductible contribution. Happy New Year, and thank you. Well, folks, we are reaching the end of the year, which means that if you are anything like me, you might be letting the spending go a little bit. Between holiday shopping and travel and parties and end-of-year donations, it can be easy to lose track of how much you're spending, what you're spending it on, and the overall state of your financial picture. Well, if you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch. Rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025, Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop or your phone. I've been using Monarch for a few months now, and for the first time in maybe ever, I feel like I have a real sense of how the money in my life is flowing, which, as I head into a new year, is going to really help me make some smart choices. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code THISDAY at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code THISDAY. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, 1947, let's revisit the Great Anglo-American Film War. This is, of course, in the aftermath of an actual war, World War II, where the US and UK fought alongside each other, but in the aftermath of the war, the two countries had to kind of recalibrate their relationship on basically all fronts. And one really interesting area, with all sorts of ripple effects, was the film industry. So, in 1947, the UK got a little protectionist, looking to tax the import of American films, and then in retaliation, the US film industry flexed its muscle, in many ways kind of started to act like an arm of American diplomacy. Then, by 1948, just a year later, they'd reached an agreement, but the spat went on long enough and was tied into so many bigger issues that it kind of reshuffled the film industries of both countries, and it set the stage for U.S. cultural dominance heading into the 50s, 60s, and beyond. It also ended up affecting the film industries in lots of other countries as well, which we will get into, but here to discuss, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Remember the episode we did about the chicken tax, which ended up having an impact on the size of trucks in the United States? So this, I think, can slot into a burgeoning ongoing series about esoteric tariffs that end up having outsized cultural impact. But it is tariff related, and we're going to roll up our sleeves.
It always comes back to the tax.
I guess it does. Let me give a little kind of interwar between the two wars setup for this, which is an important context to then pick up the story and see what happens in the aftermath of World War II. Obviously, World War I seriously disrupts the film industries and all industries in Europe and in the UK, and it kind of forces them to retreat from international markets. And at that sort of same time, we've talked about this before, but, the American film industry is really starting to take off. So there's this vacuum in the teens, 20s into the 30s, where the U.S. kind of really starts to take over. So one stat of note, in 1913, the U.S. exported 32 million feet of film. By 1925, they exported 235 million feet of film. I don't really know what that looks like, but the point is it's a
lot of tape.
It's a lot of tape, and it's a huge increase in just a matter of 10 years as you're coming out of World War I. By 1925, a third of all foreign Hollywood revenue came from the UK alone, where American films captured 95% of the market. And there were some attempts between the wars to kind of set some quotas and recalibrate this imbalance, but I think in general, the U.S. film industry is just a behemoth by the time we enter World War II. And so then the war happens, obviously decimates the economies and a lot of the industries again in Europe. But that's the kind of context of the U.S. is already sort of ascendant. UK film industry is already sort of in shambles coming out of World War II. And now we get this tariff fight.
Yeah, so that's the big picture of the film industry. The broader British economy coming out of the war is an absolute shambles. All industrialized countries were having a tough time coming out of the war. They had to move from total war footing back into their more normal economic situation. But in places like Britain and Germany and France, the country had been devastated. Its industrial capacity had been broken. For the UK, they were having to import goods from the US and other countries because they couldn't manufacture the goods at home, in part because they were manufacturing for the war, and in part because of this devastation of the war. And so Britain owed a ton of money. It just had massive debt, and it had all of its money flowing out of the country for exports. And this was destabilizing the economy. It was causing inflation, and it was turning the UK into just not the dominant world power anymore. There was a real decline in the UK's standing in the world. It was no longer an enormous military power, and now it was declining as an economic power. And they're trying to figure out in the late 1940s, how do we right this ship? How do we get our economy back? And one of the things that they seize on is, well, we've got to do something to keep more money in the country. If we can keep more money in the country, then there can be more investment and businesses will grow and we will become an economic powerhouse once again. And the way that you keep more money in the country is you tax imports to make the domestic markets more competitive. And so the UK decides in 1947 that they are going to start taxing imports in order to again, try to get their economy back on track. They were importing all kinds of things. They were importing food, they were importing furs, and they were importing films. Food, fur, and films. The three F's of every economy.
That's a nice one.
Go together so great.
You should run for office in 1946 England.
Well, there's more alliteration to come because, a film doesn't make up much of this. This is 4% of the imports into the UK. But it becomes a talking point. There's a conservative MP who talks about the economy in 1945, and he is like, if I'm compelled to choose between Bogart and bacon, I'm bound to choose bacon at the present time. So the idea that if we're going to spend our import money on things, we should spend it on delicious bacon and not on Humphrey Bogart films.
I mean, I kind of agree.
Bogart versus bacon is awesome. Yeah.
Honestly, I like a good Bogart film, but if you're taking my bacon away...
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I'll take a BLT.
We've got a problem.
I mean, what you're getting at there, Nikki, is that I think everyone in this story recognizes that there's the sort of specific economic fight that's going on, and then there's the larger symbolic, cultural, sort of hegemonic fight that's going on. Let's table that just for a moment, because I do want to linger on the kind of effect on the film industry itself. But obviously, yeah, the bigger swirl of what does Bogart versus Bacon mean symbolically is also really important too. But yeah, you said this was, 4% of the economy is clearly like a priority for the British film industry, and the U.S. does not take very kindly to this notion of being tariffed, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, you have the Motion Picture Export Association of America, MPA, if you want to put it all together, that basically is like, oh, you want to tax us? You want to put tariffs on us? And so they announced that there will be no further films supplied to British cinemas until further notice. And it's interesting. They had like a stockpile of films, about 125 features already in the UK that were awaiting release. And they are trying to use a boycott as a weapon, basically. Like this is retaliation for us. If there's so much money that was being made on the film industry in the United States, that for, the UK to impose these kind of tariffs was really going to be harmful. President of the Motion Picture Association put it this way, Eric Johnson. He said what British was trying to do was they were attempting to get $1 worth of film for a quarter. And, the idea is you get these films, you're going to have to pay for these films. I also think there's another impact about this as well, which is culturally that the film industry really is serving as like a little State Department. It is, not just operating in foreign governments, but when people take in American films, they're also taking in a part of American identity and culture and politics and values and trends and so forth. And so that has a huge implication as well. In terms of how this plays out financially, one of the plans that the British government comes up with is to try to produce as many movies as possible to sort of like sell and purchase its own product. And they have some success, but it takes time to sort of compete with what America was already producing. I mean, they're playing major catch up.
A lot of short daily news podcasts focus on just one story. But right now, you probably need more. On Up First from NPR, we bring you 3 of the world's top headlines every day in under 15 minutes. Because no one story can capture all that's happening in this big, crazy world of ours on any given morning. Listen now to the Up First podcast from NPR.
This day is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Listen, going online without ExpressVPN is like driving a car without a seatbelt. Even if you are the best driver in the world, do you really trust your life to all the other erratic, maniacal drivers on the road? Look, I'm pretty savvy. When I go online, I try and protect my information. I'm careful about what sites I visit, but I often have this lingering feeling in the back of my head that just one mistake will send my information down this whole rabbit hole where it'll get traded and exploited, and you never know where it will end up. ExpressVPN stops hackers from stealing your data by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. When I turn on ExpressVPN, which, by the way, works on phones, laptops, tablets, and more, I know that I am staying secure. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/thisday. That's expressvpn.com/thisday to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months. expressvpn.com/thisday. So we are starting to get into the thick of the holiday season, and while I love the holidays, I also know that it's a really tricky time to try and eat healthy. The sweets, the baked goods, the holiday parties, the family dinners. I have a theory that the window for bad eating actually goes from like Halloween through to the Super Bowl or maybe even Valentine's Day. It can just be a really tough stretch. Which is why, when I have a chance to actually cook at home for myself and my family, I really want something healthy, seasonal, full of vegetables and great flavors, and HelloFresh does the trick. They are the #1 meal kit in America, making home cooking easier with chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients delivered straight to your door. And they've recently taken things to the next level, doubling their menu, packing it with healthy, high-protein recipes from all over the globe. If you cook at home with HelloFresh, you just might forget that you ate all that junk at those last 5 holiday parties. The best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/thisday10FM now to get 10 free meals and a free item for life, 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on the first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/thisday10FM to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. But can I ask the two of you about that idea of the Motion Picture Association, which is founded right around this time and is now still with us as well? But, effectively acting as a little State Department, as other people have put it. Obviously we've done episodes about this, but like the actual State Department recognized the power of media, and there were lots of sort of ties and collaborations between Hollywood and the U.S. government during the war effort. And I think that there's somewhere in the swirl of all of this tariff spat, there's a recognition, I think, on the part of the UK that like, the years we just came through, like the U.S. is clearly recognizing the sort of cultural impact of this. And maybe we just want to kind of keep this a little bit more at arm's length. And I think the fascinating thing about when they impose these tariffs, the U.S. motion picture reaction is both like, well, economically, this doesn't make sense. But also there's this feeling, I think, a little bit of like, hey, we just spent the last 3-4 years kind of like helping spread the idea of democracy and like beating back fascism, and now you kind of want to keep us out, and maybe we're going to take our ball and go home, and we're not going to kind of help continue to tell that story as Europe tries to kind of rebuild.
Yeah, I think that it's a blend of all of these factors. On the cultural end, of course, these films are transmitters of American culture, and there is this fear in these other countries. It's a blended economic and cultural fear, and it's taking place in the UK, but it takes place in Canada and France and all of these other places where it's like we won't be able to develop our own domestic film industry if Hollywood is so attractive that people only want to watch American films. That becomes a big problem. But also, the culture that our people take in is not going to be French culture, Canadian culture, or British culture. It's going to be American culture. And so there is this cultural defense as well. And there's also this fear because, like you're saying, Jody, like there's an understanding after the war of the power of Hollywood to transmit culture, to transmit politics, to transmit messages. And that was a real benefit and boon during the war. But as the British are getting ready to go to war with Hollywood, I think they also understand that Hollywood could begin producing anti-British movies. And that's going to be a big problem for them if the special relationship goes sour because of this tariff and then the resulting boycott.
Yeah, it's not just about not releasing new films into the country. It's also about, the messages that are coming into those films. And I think people start to pay attention a lot as to like, especially in the UK, the image was always that the UK was all powerful, that their dominance was always front and center. And now that's being usurped by the United States. And, the United States is financially superior, but not only that, the UK is in a lot of debt still, and they remain in debt for decades after that. And so how do you sort of keep face, or if you will, in the midst of all of that? And film was one way to do that, to still maintain this reputation that, Britain wants to uphold, was through film.
I would also just add that there were talks about how to handle all of this in a friendly way, like inviting American film companies to invest in a British production company so that British people and the British industry could grow and they could make their own films. There could be some kind of partnership. None of this ever took off. And so it boils down to this sort of trade war over films.
Yeah. I mean, look, the larger picture here is, I think, obviously, as we've been discussing, the rise of American cultural dominance, but also a reckoning, I think, by the British industry and government and political apparatus that, like, their imperial power was diminished and diminishing. And, the exporting of that power through films had been kind of replaced and usurped. And there was a kind of new reality setting in. And that, I think, also just like, hey, let's get real here, manifested itself also in the way that this spat is eventually resolved. I mean, I said in the intro, it only lasts about a year, but by May of 1948, they've come to an agreement with the Anglo-American Film Agreement. We won't get too in the weeds, but basically it means that this tariff disappears. American studios can again export films into Britain without limit on the number that could be brought in. But the sort of concession is that a lot of the money that they generate has to stay in the UK, not get sent back to the United States. And so now as we start to kind of head towards the end of this episode, let's talk about all the little interesting ripple effects that happen when a tariff gets implemented and a tariff in this case gets resolved. So one really interesting ripple effect is that, okay, we can export our films and our cultural dominance to Britain, but the money and the production needs to then stay there once it's sort of generated. What does that mean? Well, for one example, it means that Roy and Walt Disney start making a bunch of live action films in the UK. So they make all their, they have their animation studios in the United States. They have all their expert animators. They make those films. They send them around the world, but they can't bring that money back to the United States. It has to stay in the UK. Well, they're not going to mount another animation operation over in Britain. And instead what they do is they start to make these cheap live action films. And this is where you end up with Treasure Island and Robin Hood and The Sword and the Rose, all made in London and in the UK, and contributing to the economy. But it wasn't purely a creative choice to move into live action. It was a kind of way to square the ripple effects of this agreement.
I think you also get a sort of, I don't know if you would call it a boom or a boomlet of British films. Like, there is a British film industry that is winning Oscars. There are movies like Lawrence of Arabia and others that are coming in the 50s and 60s. And Britain isn't down for the count. In the 1960s, London is seen as the global center of art and culture, obviously on the music front, but they're making good quality films in Britain during this period. But it is a kind of, I wouldn't say last gasp. There's obviously still lots of great cultural production coming out of Britain, but it is the last time they're seen as the center of the action. And even then, like, Hollywood's dominance is overshadowing in many ways the British film industry. And the British film industry in some ways is working within the confines of the rules that Hollywood sets.
Yeah. And you start to see, the British government sort of changes its model, but France and Italy, other countries sort of jump in, Belgium as well. I think everybody's trying to get a piece of this Hollywood pie as much as they can.
Well, yeah, but though I think this is the other really fascinating ripple effect of all of this is the way that this led to a rise and a burgeoning of Italian and French film, which, by the time we get to the 60s, that's where the most innovative filmmaking is taking place. And that is in large part because Italy and France and Belgium as well are watching what's playing out in the sort of tariff war between the U.S. and British film industries. And they're saying, well, we got to build a system that doesn't rely on the kind of like, what percentage tax are we going to negotiate? And that's where they kind of decide to make real government investment in their domestic film industries. And, it's no coincidence that 10, 15 years later, you have Fellini and you have the kind of rise of these incredible, innovative industries. And so I think that's the other kind of fascinating ripple effect for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a sense that you need to protect your cultural industries because a spat like this, like what happened in Britain, that was not the spat that other countries wanted to be involved in. And their success at building those domestic industries and having those domestic industries be so well recognized for the quality of the work that they're putting out. I think, like, not just art house films, but spaghetti westerns and all of these, all of these different films that are coming out and reshaping the industry and feeding back into Hollywood in some ways is, like you're saying, Jody, is a result of the lessons learned from this showdown. It's just that the UK isn't necessarily at the heart of those innovations because in a lot of ways it kind of loses out in this fight.
But I think there are other countries too that manage to create their own markets that fuel their own countries. Like I think of Nollywood or Bollywood, or China's becoming a powerhouse in the film industry. Yeah. Like there are a lot of countries that are kind of like, no, we will do our own thing and we'll keep it in-house and it will sell. And you've started to see slowly but surely how a lot of those films have made their way into American markets as well. I
mean, that story of the last 10, 20 years has been the story of the globalization of Hollywood, or actually the hollowing out of Hollywood. So little is actually made in Los Angeles these days, and this is a huge problem for actors and set workers who are based out of Hollywood, because films are being made in Vancouver for a long time was the hot spot, but Budapest, Europe, they're being made everywhere but Morocco, the United States. Wherever it's cheaper. And that has been a huge issue. And the rise of Bollywood and of the Chinese film industry and China as a market has also changed the kinds of films that are being made. And so we're in the middle of a major transformation in film as an art form that's being driven by these economic considerations in a way that I think
Though I think like Hollywood is in trouble has certainly penetrated the public consciousness. And actually, to the point where now Donald Trump, not that long ago, floated the idea, actually reversing the roles here a little bit. He floated the idea of imposing a tariff on stuff that is made overseas and brought to the United States. And, I think people quickly pointed out to him that, like, yeah, there's a real issue here, but, like, actually we still run a, like, $15 billion surplus and, like, you're not going to actually make money off of this. Yeah. But it was one of those classic moments where it's like, yeah, Trump is kind of like, got like 15% instinct headed in the right direction that like, yeah, we need to do something about the fact that this industry is going overseas and Hollywood's being decimated. But like his answer and his understanding of it was not actually, going to be
like, no
going to solve
Shocker.
it. But it is definitely bubbling up there. And I think there is still, to your point, NIki, like the reckoning is still to come on that for sure. And, so are the ripple effects. Like we've been saying, like you never know what's going to kind of be the sort of creative response to some of these more technocratic spats. So we shall see. But anyway, we will leave it there. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America 250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, members get exclusive access to analysis and information about the upcoming semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. Join in, find out lots more at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Brittany Brown is our editor. My name is Jody Avirgan. See you soon.
Radiotopia from PRX.